Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. Welcome to the second edition of our Cardano Developer Office Hours. I'm Darlisa, and I'm going to be your host for today. So just before you dive into today's exciting topic, I have two quick updates. So the first one is that our Layer App Hackathon registration is open. So if you have that great idea that is just waiting for a good moment to bring it to life, that's the right time. So make sure to subscribe your team until the 30th of October. So the hackathon is going to be running from the 3rd to the 11th of November, and you can join this in person in Berlin or globally online from wherever you are. So there will be two tracks that you can choose. That's the Cardano General or AI related topic with Masumi. So you also are going to have the support from engineers from the Bloxbeam, Cardano Foundation, Masumi, and Machine teams. And you have the chance to compete for a $30,000 prize pool. So the details for the hackathon is on the chat. Just check it out. And secondly, our Cardano Academy is giving 100% discount voucher for whoever wants to deepen their knowledge in blockchain or Cardano. So again, all the information is on the chat with the promo code as well. And now let's move in for today's spotlight session. So we are thrilled to welcome Santiago Carmuega from TXPipe. He's going to dive into why semantic contexts matter, explore whether the UTXO is the right model, the abstraction for the apps, and also introduce us to TX3, that's a new DSL for describing transactions, and then wrap up with a live demo. Without further ado, Santiago, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Darlisa, and thanks for having me. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to discuss a little bit of these topics and some of the things we've been doing from TXPipe. TXPipe does a lot of things. We do audits, tailored custom software development. But at the core, what we like to do is build tooling for developers. We've been in the Cardano ecosystem for several years now. And we are very proud that a lot of the things that we've been building are extensively used by the ecosystem. Hopefully we can keep doing that, because that's our goal in life from TXPipe, is to work to the point where we can have nice developer experience in Cardano and UTXO blockchains in general. Now, getting into the topic, first, I want to ask, does anybody recognize the game in the screenshot? Oh, that's a little bit tougher. This is the second Monkey Island. It is called Lichak Revenge. And I think for me, it's my top favorite game of all time. And for those who are not familiar with it, it's a point-and-click adventure. Point-and-click adventure means that you are this character within this story world. In this particular case, you're a pirate in the Caribbean. And you play by exploring places, different environments, and interacting with those environments to solve puzzles and to progress the history. What you have is an inventory, like the one you see at the bottom here, where you have different verbs. These are the things that your character can do. And then you have an inventory of things where you can apply those verbs, and then you also interact with the environment by selecting a verb, something from the inventory, and trying to do something with whatever you're dealing with whatever puzzle you have to solve. And in particular, this one was about trying to close this water pump that you see in the screenshot, because you had to stop the water from a cascade and then entering a cave and continue with your exploration. Now, this one was really tough. I remember spending like 2 weeks just stuck on this thing. And this is on my youth. I'm a reasonably old guy. I played this in the 90s. And at that point in time, there were no Reddit walkthrough. There was no forums or online help that you could get. If you got stuck in one of these things, you had to just deal with it and brute force it. And I remember just being almost to the point of giving up. And finally, I understood what happened, but the problem that was that I had to look for a wrench, right, to close the pump. And I kept looking everywhere for a wrench, and there was nothing to be found. Now, I was playing this game in the Spanish version. So it seems that in English, the type of wrench that you need is called a monkey wrench. So the game, which is really playful in that sense, was expecting you to actually get an actual monkey and use the monkey as the wrench to close the pump. So nobody would have thought that you would have to select a monkey unless you had that extra context regarding the meaning of what you were doing. So it was really frustrating, but it taught me a really important lesson, which is that the context and the semantics mean a lot in everywhere and anything that you're doing. So with that, let's segue to a little bit of blockchain. Because if you take a look at the screenshot, what you see is just some random transaction that I took the screenshot from Public Explorer. And can you tell me what this transaction is doing by looking at the screenshot? To be honest, I don't know. I think that I know enough about the structures of the transactions and the ledger in Cardano to be an educated developer in that sense. But it's still tough because if you see the data in the screenshot, you see some bytes here for the transaction hash. You see something that's probably an address. You see some quantities and some letters that probably represent some sort of token, but there's no intent. There's nothing describing what the transaction was about. And yes, if you're an expert and you're very experienced in reading the history of the chain, you might get a sense. But there's nothing, strictly speaking, there that will tell you what the intent of the transaction is. And why is that? If we try to abstract a little bit what a UTXO blockchain is, we have to deal with this little primitives. Where what we have is UTXOs, and we have this scripts that we refer to as validators. And at the end of the day, if you want to abstract away the interactions, what you have is probably just two verbs in Cardano land. You either spend UTXO that has a little piece of data, the datum, and the redeemer trying to describe the action of that spend. And then you have minting also with a redeemer, and you have other purposes obviously on chain, but I think these are the two that one would use on a daily basis when trying to build something, some sort of dApp. So for developers that are used to look at systems from the perspective of the interface, the UTXO blockchain is just a bag of UTXOs and two verbs that I can interact with. I spend one of those UTXOs or I mint something new, and that's about it. It's not very expressive. If you were in Monkey Island again and you were interacting with a UTXO blockchain, it would be like having in the inventory just a verb that says spend and then a lot of assets in your bag. And you can do a lot of things. Obviously, we are already doing a lot of things on top of UTXO blockchains in Cardano. But from my perspective, I think that this is too low level. I think from somebody who wanted to build higher level user intents, dealing with this is just like dealing with assembly. We're going too deep, and we need some sort of higher abstraction that gives us a little bit more expressiveness when dealing with the blockchain as a whole system. And that will not only make it easier for the developer, but it has a lot of interesting side effects that we can later discuss. Now, let's jump to EVM land for a little while. I think that in EVM blockchains, they got this right from the start, but for the wrong reasons, not because it was planned and designed, but because they were forced to. Now, what do you think that is? Anybody wants to chime in? And this is hopefully an interactive session, so if you have any questions or if you want to just comment on anything, please do so. Why is it that in EVM blockchains, when you interact with things, you get much more semantic context? Because, for example, this is just two methods in a smart contract. I think this one is from Uniswap. And what you get is add liquidity and swap tokens. So it doesn't matter that this is just a concrete example of DEX, but instead of dealing with primitives, they deal with sort of like function calls that describe the intent of what the user wants to do with that contract. And that is the level of abstraction that I think developers are used to dealing with. That is how we do most of the things in Web2. That is how we do most of the things in any type of discipline or industry. We deal with functions that describe things in terms of the domain that we're dealing with. And EVM has this out of the box because they are forced to put everything on chain. So as you probably know, EVM smart contract, the business logic that defines the changes in the accounts and in the balances has to live inside the blockchain, has to be run by the nodes in the blockchain. That means that to interact with it, you need to expose the interfaces that are written in that specific domain. In UTXO, in Cardano, we don't have that constraint. In fact, we have the benefit of being able to do a lot of the work off-chain. So we build the transactions, we have the business logic outside of the chain, and then what we do is we submit not only the requirements in terms of UTXOs that we're going to be inputting and consuming, but also the outcome of the transaction. And we do that beforehand in a deterministic way. And that's a huge advantage. And we don't want to lose that. But at the same time, it means that the developer building the transaction has to have the understanding of all of the business logic of your dApp so that it can build the transaction. Now, the question here is, can we have our cake and eat it too? Sorry. And I think that the answer is yes. So what we are proposing here is that the low-level interaction with the blockchain remains the same. We deal in terms of sending specific spend, mint, and different ways of consuming UTXOs, and that is the language of the blockchain. But from the perspective of the user, and you can think of this as the developer building the dApp, we should be able to have an interface that describes the intents from the perspective of the domain that you're dealing with. And for that, what we've been working on, our proposed solution is this TX3 DSL. And the idea is that if a developer can describe in a strict fashion and in a standard fashion what those domain-specific interfaces are for your specific protocol, then the task of turning that into lower-level primitives that can then be submitted on-chain could be removed from the effort that the developer has to do in order to build something. That can be automated away, that can be automatically generated just by having a well-defined description of the interfaces and how those map into the lower-level primitives. And I mentioned that this also has some interesting side effects. And I think that by allowing ourselves to describe things in terms of protocols, and I might need to make a clarification. I'm using the word protocol a lot here, and you will see that everywhere that you're dealing with TX3, you're probably dealing with a protocol. This is a different term for what we usually refer to as the app. So one of the main distinctions, I think, is that we need to stop thinking in terms of the apps and thinking in terms of protocols on-chain. Because if we do that, it means that now we no longer have the front end of the app and the blockchain integration as one couple thing, which is one of the benefits of this proposed solution. The idea of being able to decouple those two things, it's, I believe, really important and something that we need to push for. Because right now, when you're dealing with building the app, probably the people that are building the protocol in terms of transactions and validators run on chain, and the team building the front end that you need to have to interact with those are one and the same. And that might be useful and interesting in specific scenarios, but ideally, you can decouple those two things. If you could have protocols that are described in such a way that anybody can build the user experience on top of that, now you suddenly have a much more rich ecosystem where people are just putting out their protocols like sort of APIs in the Web2 sense. And then you have other people having new and novel ways of composing and orchestrating all those on-chain protocols without having them to be the same and only one. So we have slight hints of that happening in the ecosystem with, for example, DEX aggregators, where they reverse engineer a few of the protocols that are out there, sometimes with help, sometimes doing them on their own. But what they are doing is removing the user experience layer from specific DEXs and turning that into just API calls that they run inside of their backend and putting their own novel and interesting UI that aggregates things from multiple places. That's a very clear, concrete example, very specific, but it's a concrete example of the benefits of suddenly having the stuff that happens on chain being some UI agnostic protocol versus the bundled thing that we have right now. So that's one of the interesting side effects. The other interesting side effect is that in the same way that you can decouple the UI from the protocol, our hope is that you can also decouple the specific chain running the protocol. So if you can describe how your protocol runs in terms of the domain, for example, in a DEX, I want to add liquidity or I want to make a swap, then the way in which that turns into something that runs, for example, in Cardano versus on Hydra, shouldn't be tightly coupled with a protocol. It should be boilerplate that you can auto-generate for specific scenarios. So hopefully the other good side effect is that you can define once your protocol and then reuse those same definitions in different contexts. Maybe you want your DEX that is currently running on L1 now move into Midgard, then you shouldn't need to rebuild everything. You should be able, from the description of the interfaces of the protocol, be able to automate the last mile of connecting things onto the chain. Okay, I'll stop there. Any questions so far? Anything that, yes?
Yeah, so we have CIP 57, right, which is blueprint. And it also defines some kind of interface. It's not exactly ABI, but it's a JSON schema, right? In a simple term. So from there, you can find inputs and whatever thing, and you can generate. It's not 100% like very usable, I would say, but maybe some description could be added on top of that. I was just thinking, can we leverage what we have done so far and then build on top of that the TX3? Or
Yeah, great question, and thanks for jumping in. So blueprints describe things, provide a lot of description of the interfaces at the low-level primitives. So you obviously know this already, Satya, but we have the validators with the definition of the datums and the redeemers, and the CIP 57, these blueprint files, allows us to understand the shape of those structures and gives us a hint of how to execute those independent validators. And I think that's a very good first step. what we're proposing is a level of abstraction above that, so that you don't only have individual validators, but now you have transaction templates of transactions that represent the intent of the user. Because right now, those validators in isolation, they don't give you the full picture of what the protocol is doing. You have missing information.
I was wondering how many of the most used protocols today have you guys tried to reproduce with TX3, and how well is it going, and how many issues you have encountered?
Yeah. So thank you for that. Yes, we've we try to dog food a lot of TX3. We've been everything that it's the apps that are on the orbit of TXPipe. We try to first put them on TX3. For example, we have GitHoney represented in TX3. We have Asteria represented in TX3, and many of the new things that we're working either for third parties or ourselves. We are having a TX3 first approach, so that we force ourselves to understand what the limitations and the pain points are. Now, we have a catalyst proposal that luckily got funded, that it's about going out there and looking at existing protocols, not from TXPipe, but from the ecosystem, and try to reverse engineer 5 of them into TX3 and expose them as this agnostic protocols to see if we can start getting developers to use those things to orchestrate their user interfaces. That's our next task, and we're really excited about that one. And regarding frictions and pain points, I could go for an hour because there are a lot, but I think that so far none of them have been blockers in the sense of taking us away from the path of going for some sort of TX3 definition language. Nothing so far. It's a foundational problem. Everything is how do we make it easier for different primitives or different scenarios to being described in terms of this DSL. One in particular, which I think it's interesting to highlight, is, and it's related to the blueprint, is, and you will see afterwards a little bit in the demo, but dealing with TX3, it's not that it abstracts away the requirement of dealing with the off-chain if you're building the protocol yourself, right? You will need to write the validators. And that means that you have shapes of data structures, like our datums and redeemers, that are both repeated in our TX3 code and in our, icon code. And one of the problems is, okay, how do we remove that duplication and we facilitate the developer experience? And the answer for that has been using CIP57, these blueprint files, in a way that TX3 supports importing from blueprint files to inherit all of the data structures that they already described. And they are turned into TX3 first-class citizen types that you can use from the code. So in that sense, you can write once and reuse those same structural shapes without having to copy any code directly from the TX3 side.
I had another question, which is, since this is, as you said, some kind of a protocol, right, to describe how to explain how something is intended to work from like an intent way to an actual implementation with UTXOs and different printed from Cardano. How well do you think this can be leveraged in different languages? And do you have support of multiple languages for TX3? Programming languages, I mean, sorry.
Yes, I will defer that to the demo afterwards because I go through that process. But the spoiler is that you write once in this description language, which is, I usually call TX3 a DSL, but I think that the best description would be to call it an IDL. It's more of an interface description language. So the idea from the developer experience to deal with multiple languages interacting with it is that you write the definition of the interface once, and then you code generate the actual transaction building stuff to each of the languages that we support, and hopefully we expand that support as we move forward. But there is a deterministic path from the description of the interface onto the actual transaction building logic. That's the premise that TX3 works from. Let me read. Do you see a future where wallets could parse and evaluate TX3 transactions intents, and based on transaction signatures, wallets could generate dynamic UIs? Yeah, totally. That's the dream. One of the things that we haven't explored so far, but I think that it's really interesting, is once we have this reverse engineering of existing protocols of stuff that happens on chain, seeing if we can use that information to tag historical transactions and suddenly turn those blocks of hashes and values and numbers into something that describes the intent of what happened at that point in time. So I think there is a way to describe things that already happened in the history. And from the perspective of UIs trying to abstract away, I think this is the analogy that I like to use is this being something like open API, but for blockchain. In the Web2 land, the idea is that you have these APIs, and those APIs allow you to execute things with different systems. And Open API provides you a context of how those interfaces are built. And most of the time, you can do a lot of automatic UI generation from those interfaces. But just to be honest, it will depend a lot on the use case and the level of specificity that your user experience requires. For sure, there's a lot of things that you can do from the UI level that could be generated automatically, and you will see a little bit of that in the demo. But obviously, at the end of the day, if you want a really shiny, specific, friendly user experience, you will need a human, hopefully for some time. You will need a human to be able to do that and code that using the TX3 protocol as your open API spec for removing all of the boilerplate. That means dealing with the lower level primitives of the blockchain. This is the repo where we are working with everything. I will, if you're so kind of putting some star on the TX3 report, that would be much appreciated. And you will find the main repository here, which is TX3, which has all of the core language. But there's also other repositories for all of the tooling surrounding the language. Regarding how to get started, I want to mention that we have this documentation, that it's always room for improvements and always work in progress as we add new features and things. But I think it's a really nice way to get started. It has installation steps, and you have a quick start of how to begin with a Hello World example and how to use the rest of the tooling around it. But instead of showing you docs, yeah, thanks for sharing, Darlisa. What I would do if the demo gods are in my favor is to try to do a little bit of live session. So let's begin. Everything starts with TX3 Up. TX3 Up is the installer that will check that you have all of the dependencies on your system. I do. But if you go through the quick start, the first step will be to install TX3 App, and you can use this to get updates. And the next thing is that you have different channels. So if you want to be on the edge of things, you can use the beta channel, and you will get everything as we move forward. But you also have the stable channel where you can just deal with the things that have gone through a stabilization period. Now, once you have everything installed, the CLI which you will use to interact with, it's called trixs. Trixs is the NPM that you have for Node.js, but in the TX3 world. It's like the cargo or the NPM of those languages. With Trix, you will be able to manage your specific protocols, specific projects that you're dealing with. So I will create a new folder. I will call it my dApp. It should be my protocol, but I don't know. And you have a Trix init command. Before continuing, is this zoom level enough? Can you read from the screen? Just a thumbs up. Anybody? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So the Trix init will ask you some questions, and it will create the initial scaffolding files. Did I see a hand being raised? Anybody wanted to ask anything? Okay. So it asks for a protocol name, the owner of the scope, or description. I'm going fast here because there's nothing interesting, but I will stop here because to Matthew's question, this is where you select the target languages for which we will be auto-generating code. These are the ones that we have currently developed. The idea is that this is more of a plugin system, so you can add more, and hopefully the community works on extra stuff. I'm going to choose TypeScript and Rust this time, and then some confirmation, and that's about it for the initialization. This has created these files, a main TX3 file, which has our hello world protocol, and it has this trixs.toml file, which is the project file that has all of the metadata for this sort of package, and then some other things that I will explain afterwards. The next thing that makes sense is maybe, no, this is, what is this? This is good. Sorry. 1 second. Not good, I want code. So I open the folder that I just created. And what you have, as I mentioned, is this main TX3 file that is our hello world. And what would you say it's a hello world in Cardano transaction? Sending a transfer of data, right? From one party to the other. So that's what we have here. And let me give you a little walkthrough of the very basics of the language. I just hidden the contents of the transfer because I want to emphasize the fact that we have 3 main things, which is a definition of a party, in this case a sender, and then another party which is called the receiver, and then what we have is a transaction that it's a name transfer. Now, inside the body of the transaction is all of the logic that maps from the user intent to the low-level primitives. And it does so in terms of the parameters that we pass to this specific transaction. Now, here, this name is describing the intent, but it could be make swap, whatever the intent is of your protocol. But as I mentioned, this is just a hello world for transferring data. So first important thing here is that now you can see that the entry point for the protocol is something that looks a lot like a function call, right? You have a function that it's called transfer and has a parameter that it's the quantity. Now, if you get to look inside what is happening, what you have is the definition of an input and the definition of outputs. Again, this is a very basic example. When I'm defining an input, what I'm saying is from which party I'm expecting that input to be, and then I'm specifying some constraints regarding what the inputs should be. In this case, I'm saying that I need a minimum amount of data plus the fees, which is a value that it's coming from the environment, and it's a constant that would be auto-filled by the system. So here I'm saying I will need a UTXO that has at least the amount of quantity that I want to transfer and the fees that I'm going to be using in this transaction. And then I have two outputs. One output, which is going to the party called receiver, and then I'm passing the amount of ADA that I want to transfer. And then there's another output, which is the change back to the sender, which is expressed as whatever the source input is, minus the ADA that I'm transferring, minus the fees. So here, one of the interesting things is that you have all of the inputs and the outputs tied together through a relationship and some business invariants that have to be maintained. Like, we are providing enough context to tell the transaction if this is balanced or not, and that is really important information that can help in the process of building more complex stuff. The other thing to take into account is that TX3 is doing semantic analysis of this. So if you have things that suddenly don't match, you get the reports and the warnings from the tooling. Here, I changed the name of the source to source2. So now the output is saying, hey, you want me to send something that it's not defined. So it helps you out with the process of mapping things in a way that it remains consistent. Yeah, Matthews? Sorry, this is a regular level because ideally you want source target without need to input and output. Yes, so that's a good concern. So one of the premises that we're going for, one of the premises that we're working with, to be better put, is that everything that it's inside here is for the protocol author to define. We don't see blockchain developers as a single type of audience. I usually define them as the protocol authors, which are dealing with the on-chain aspects of things, and you have the integrators, the dApp builders that ideally they won't deal with this because it was already defined by the protocol authors, but they will be just working in terms of function calls to a specific intents. Sorry, there's a follow-up. Do you want to unmute, or do you prefer to go through chat?
Do you speak about me or Matthews?
Oh, sorry, it was to Matthews. Anyone?
It was related somehow. Like, I was wondering. So this is obviously inside of the transfer. It's addressed to the people that write the protocol, right? Not the one that use, as you said it. I'm just still wondering, at that level of specification, are you still how much constrained are you? Like, for example, is output a keyword for an actual output, or is it a keyword for a destination? For example, in my question, I would say, could the solver of this transfer intent decide to generate two outputs instead of one, as long as the solver succeeds?
Yeah. So very interesting topic, and one of the more subtle nuances that is required. So the guidelines that we're taking, and this is all in flux, so take it with a grain of salt. But what we're trying to do is make it concise but low level inside the transaction. So it means that each of this is representing an output, but there are a few keywords to make these things a little bit more easy to deal with. Like, for example, an input in simple terms represents just one UTXO that has to fulfill these requirements. And you have other types of constraints that you can specify, like the datum is of a specific type. And if you want to have a specific assets, you can define assets as constraints. But at the end of the day, it's one UTXO that has to fulfill those constraints. Now, there are some scenarios where you don't want to go all that deep from even if you're the protocol author, and you just want to say, I need to fulfill a specific amount, so and not specific inputs. So you can put this asterisk on an input, and that is turning that block, that criteria, into any number of UTXOs that they all add up to the constraints that you're asking for. So that's one specific example, but it's I think something that is representative of the overall philosophy that we're going for. It's within the transaction, it is low level. It is for the protocol author to have as much expressiveness they can in the primitives, but trying to have quality of life improvements in the syntax that allow you to work simply with complex things. Yes, Hati.
Yeah, so something specific to this, but there are like two parties, right? One is protocol author who is writing this from their perspective, and the second party is who is calling, and they have, let's say, thousands of UTXOs, and they need to do UTXO selection in a smarter way because they know how their wallet is maintained, and it's not up to protocol author to decide, right, how this particular wallet will do UTXO selection. I think if you can provide some kind of plugin here, some kind of control to the actual off-chain developer, that would be good because protocol author cannot decide everything for the caller, right, in this case.
Yeah, exactly. So ideally, there are opt-in things like this. This asterisk, in a way, is something that it's hinting on to having specific ways of guiding the coin selection algorithm. But there is also a way to opt out if you want to let the wallet or the caller do all of the input selection stuff. And that means that you can pass specific UTXOs as arguments to the transaction. And in that way, you define the inputs from the outside. Now, what we've seen so far, trying to map protocols, existing protocols, is that this level of expressiveness so far has proven sufficient for most of the things. And sometimes you do have to just escape from automatic coin selection and pass specific UTXO references, and that's okay. For example, in Asteria, almost all of the protocol for moving ships, gathering fuel, mining Asteria, and so forth are expressed in terms of coin selection that it's done automatically, but specific actions like gathering a token needs to have a reference to a specific UTXO. So what we end up doing is passing here variables and making it explicit from the caller.
Thanks.
Since we're running out of time, I think, Darlisa, let me know when we need to wrap it up. But I don't want to go without doing a little bit of the rest of the tooling that it's attached to the language, because TX3 is the language, but we've been putting a lot of effort in the tooling around it. So, for example, what we have is, if you call trixs devnet, what you will get is an instance. Sorry, let me stop a little bit. Here, I forgot to mention that this you have this trixs toml file, and one of the things that you have defined here is that you have development wallets already created, and you can specify that you want to just have a random key for each of those. And then you have this devnet.toml file, and you can have many of these files, ideally one for each type of scenario that you want to interact with. And here what you do is you describe specific UTXOs for specific addresses and specific amounts that will be already there whenever you start your devnet. So with that information, let me go back to the trixs devnet. So this is running an instance. Not my. So I'm running the devnet on top. I'm going to hide it a little bit. And then there's another command called explore, which opens up a fancy TUI that it's showing the state of your devnet and allows you to kind of see what's happening across the board. So what you see here in this in this chain activity graph is blocks as they are being generated by the DevNet. And what you can do here is access different wallets that you have already defined. And for each of the wallets, you get to see the UTXO balance. Let me just put it a little bit small. So let's keep this running on the background, and let me split again. So I'm running everything. I'm gonna use yet another command from trixs, which is called invoke. So you saw that we had that that transfer action, right? So we can call trixs invoke, which is just a manual way of invoking those specific transaction templates. So I just did that, and it's asking me for a quantity. If you remember, in the hello world, we had only one transaction, so the trixs invoke command knows that it's that you want to call that because it's the only one that you have there. But if you had multiple transactions defined in the same protocol, you will be asked for the one that you want. And then it's asking me for the parameter of the transfer, right? So trixs invoke is trying to run this, and it's asking me for this. So I will just put some random value. And then it's asking for to tell it the parties that are going to be used for this particular execution. So I'm saying that Alice, which is one of my dev wallets defined in my common file, is going to be the receiver, and then Bob is going to be the sender, and then it's asking me who I want to sign the transaction with. Since Bob is the sender, he's the one, and that is what you get as the output, which is the zero of the transaction. Now, on the left side of things, you see that suddenly this block is highlighted because you have a new transaction in there. And what you see is that the balances on each of the dev wallets change. Now Alice has some extra ADA and Bob has a little bit less ADA. And if you go to the transactions tab, you see that there's now a new transaction, and it allows you to explore the things that happen. Obviously, this is low level. This is meant for the protocol authors to evaluate things as they are developing. And that's the very basic way of using the tooling. But there are some other hidden gems inside the Trix CLI that I encourage you to explore. Now, let's see if I can do it in just 1 minute. This is another project. This is a much more complex project that has its own website and with a UI. And what we have is another TX3 file. This one, it's proposing a protocol where you can claim tokens by specifying a PIN. You have to know a password in order to claim your tokens. And this is the transaction. For the sake of time, I won't go into details, but I can show the repo afterwards in case you want to explore it. But what I want to do is show the code generation stuff. So hopefully you can see the screen. What I'm running here is trixs-binchen. This is another command. And remember that we chose TypeScript. Well, this project also has TypeScript selected. So when I run this is taking a look at the TX3 file, and it's generating TypeScript package that looks like this. Inside here, you will see that there is a lot of code that I won't get into detail, but it has the output of turning the TX3 definition into a specific TypeScript transaction building logic. Now, the way that you consume this from the outside, which is where the magic happens, here you have a React page with some React code. It doesn't matter. It just shows, if we had a little bit more time, you will see that this is a website that allows you to input the PIN, the password, in order to claim tokens. But the only thing that I want to show you is that by code generating your off-chain stuff, what you have is now a new module that's called off-chain. And inside here, you can import something that is called protocol. This protocol has the entry point for the TX3 logic. So if you now call protocol, you will see that you have a function that is called claim tokens TX, which is analogous to the claim tokens transfer function transaction that we have right here. So the code gen generated this function for us, that it's just a function call, and it asks us to specify the values of the parameters, the arguments for that particular transaction. So we have to specify the PIN, and we also have to specify the party that it's involved, which is the customer, and this will be an address. The output of this is the CBOT transaction, and then you can use to give it to the wallet for signing, or if you need to just sign it from a backend, you can also do that, and suddenly at the end of the process, submit it on chain. And yes, that was a little bit quick. Sorry for that, but that's hopefully a fast but reasonable description of the whole life cycle, going from zero to having something that it's connected to an actual UI.
Hey, so the documents mention a set of diagram conventions to visualize, adapt different levels of abstraction. I'm not sure if you demoed that, or do you want to touch on that a bit?
Yeah, let me see if this is working. We were having issues with a certificate, but this is TX3.LAN, which is, this is a preview, and we are under heavy development, so don't use it just for the sake of showing a little bit. But the idea is that, as with many languages, there is also a registry behind it. So the idea is that protocol authors can publish their TX3 protocol so that other dApp builders can just look for them and integrate them. Here we have one that is for Asteria, and this is a little bit what the registry looks like. And regarding transactions, here you have a lot of ways that you can learn what is happening with the protocol. Here you have something that looks like a little bit like the Swagger UI, where you can just execute the different transactions that are defined in the protocol. If you want to try them out, you can do so, and it will give you a keyword as an outcome. You have access to the TX3 file syntax for sync, and you also have diagram that is auto-generated from the description that you have in the TX3 file. So here you see a create ship transaction from the Asteria game, and it describes the inputs and the parties and the outputs. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Marius.
Hello. First, thank you for the demo. I think, in my opinion, TX3 will be a very big game changer for the Cardano ecosystem.
Thank you.
So, my question is, you showed at the beginning a slide where TX3 could interact with protocols on different chains, like Cardano, Bitcoin, and so on. It's pretty straightforward for me how this could be achieved, but I'm wondering if it also supports protocols that span across chains. For example, I have a protocol that involves some transactions on Cardano main chain, and at the same time some transactions on Midgard or maybe Midnight and so on. In order to achieve this, I'm thinking that the context should be, tagged at the level of parties, policies, even transactions, so that the resolver knows which chain to query for inputs, outputs, and so on. So have you considered this use case, or you plan to address it in the future?
I think there are many layers to that problem. Right now, we have the outlet that connects TX3 to Cardano. We also have the one that connects to Hydra. In fact, the vending machine demo that was going around in different events is using TX3 sending transactions to Hydra. And so if you isolate specific protocols at the protocol level, you can already tell TX3, okay, you're now dealing with Hydra, so talk with its own APIs and submit transactions using this and query for UTXOs using this specific channels. And another protocol, and maybe the same TX3 file can now be used in a different scenario where the outlet is Cardano, so how you query for UTXOs and how you submit transactions and the different specific features that you have are specific to Cardano. But it's still the unit that you interact with is at the protocol level. There's no way of telling the same protocol that this transaction has to go to Hydra and this transaction has to go to Midcat, for example. Now, you can reuse the same syntax and apply the same protocol in different places. The way that I would approach right now that problem is to have different TX3 protocols for each of the different chains that you're connecting to and orchestrate the communication between each of these protocols from the outside. Like I need to, for example, I want to log something on Bitcoin, and so then I submit a transaction using one protocol in Bitcoin, and then I want to unlock that same thing on or generate some wrapped assets on Cardano. So I will be submitting a different transaction from a different TXT protocol onto Cardano, and the orchestrator is outside of any individual specific protocol.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe another question: does the TX3 language, the support composition of transactions? I mean, to add, let's say I have two transactions and one is a subset of conditions of another. Could I reuse that definition inside the block of the second one?
Right. Composing transactions, we've been exploring that. I wouldn't call it a production-ready feature, but what you could have is, for example, define make call to specific transactions and then compose those things before generating the seaboard. And then what you will end up is with a transaction that has the aggregation of the two intents into a single one. There are some nuances regarding how you handle fees and things that are shared so that you can distribute them accordingly. So I wouldn't call it something ready because there are a few unknowns that we need to deal with. But conceptually, that is hopefully one of the use cases that we support. So it's not a one-to-one relationship between user intent calling it at the TX3 level and the transaction that gets submitted. Hopefully, you can aggregate and bundle different intents into a single transaction in order to optimize for fees. Now, that's one concern. The other, which I'm not sure which one you were referring to, but the other aspect would be transaction chaining. So the here, the component that you use for querying for UTXOs and all of the backend part that we didn't get to see in the demo, but happy to talk to you afterwards. But you have an open source backend component that does all of the input resolution from a TX3 definition file. That component supports, or is going to support, transaction chaining by remembering the past UTXOs already handled through that same backend component. So in that way, as long as you have certain affinity with the backend component that you're using for building these transactions, you can get transaction chaining out of the box.
Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. So just to be respectful of everybody's time, I would like to wrap up this session. So Santi, I appreciate that more people would like to ask questions. So what's the best way to reach out? Do you have, what's the channel?
Ideally through Discord, I think that would be the best way to get in touch with us. The docs side, I think, has all of the links. I'm not sure if the Discord one, but otherwise you can go to txpipe.io and there's the Discord invite there. So I would say that's that would be the best way to get in touch with us and ask for the questions and maybe give us some feedback. This is brand new and it's already being used and we are using it. But the thing that we need the most is feedback and people telling us what's good and what's bad from the current approach.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Santiago, for the great presentation. It was very insightful, and you definitely would like to see more in a few weeks. So just to see where your roadmap's driving you, and also see what else you're working on. So appreciate your time. Appreciate everyone's time as well, and for the participation as well, for the questions. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everyone, and I see you next Friday. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.